Hello, everybody. This is the Empirical Audiophile. This is Kevin speaking here. And if you've been watching my channel, you know that I've been going out with this Unison Research Simply 845, and I decided to try some new output tubes on the 845 tubes. And I've been doing some research for a company called PSVANE. And OCD Mikey, I don't know if you ever watch his channel, but OCD Mikey did a kind of A/B test with some tubes in a single-ended triode amplifier, and he exchanged the tubes with some PSVANE Acme 845s. And so what I decided is I went off of Amazon and I got some of the 845s here. And the packaging is quite impressive. I will admit that. And the tubes themselves are also quite impressive. They're like a 845 tube on steroids. They're a lot bigger than the tubes that originally came with the Simply 845, as you can see. Like I said, they look like they're an 845 tube on steroids. So when OCD Mikey did the shootout, you had comments and stuff, but I looked to try to find out what people would say about these tubes. And some people liked them. Other people said, well, the Western Electric 845s are better or whatever. And some said that they had a quality control problem with them. And I think these are supposed to be, one of their top of line tubes. These are very expensive tubes. Let me put it that way. If you get like a set of Western Electric 300B tubes, they're quite expensive. These are quite expensive 845 tubes for your output tubes, your power amp tubes. So I decided, well, Mikey did a shootout. I wanted to find out how they perform. According to what people were saying, they could be worth the money as far as I'm concerned. And if they help improve the system, then they're well worth the money. But it's a big, heavy tube. So what I did is I put these in and took the ones that originally came with the Unison Research Simply 845, and I put these in. Now, the Unison Research 845 is self-biasing, so you don't have to bias anything. And I watched some of the videos like from Italy, and some of them said because it's self-biasing, it's kind of easy if you want to swap out some of the 845 tubes. Basically plug and play, they were saying. So I put the tubes in. They seem to have no problem biasing as far as I know, because it is a self-biasing integrated amp. And I thought I would take a listen and let them warm up the tubes. So I decided to give a listen like I always do with my normal suspects, test CD first, things like that. Well, here's what I found. Compared to when OCD Mikey did his switch off, and of course, we're talking about the internet. You can't really hear that good off the internet about what something sounds like. So in person now, I get to try the PSVANE Acme tubes. And like I said, they're expensive. They're very expensive. So I put them in. What did I find out? Well, I'll tell you the good and the bad about them. First, I'll tell you the good. When you look at these tubes, you're going to notice they're very well made. I cannot see anything about this tube that looks bad, cheap, chintzy, nothing. Everything looks very, very well made. I can't find any flaws that I would say this is a cheaply made tube from China. No, it looks like it's a very high quality tube. Really, gold plated. binding posts here, everything you would want in a high quality tube. Of course, the ones that are in there look high quality too. I can't find anything wrong with them. They look very well built, and they're from China too, the 845. So I put them in. According to what people were saying, I was trying to get my review to see, you know, was I going to come out with the same outcome as people were saying they heard with OCD Mikey with these 845s, these Acme 845s? Well, first of all, it changed the whole presentation of the integrated amp, the Simply 845. And what happened is that the bass sounds deeper, which a lot of people said the bass sounded better, but the bass sounds a little more forward than what these are putting. So is the bass really deeper? Well, what happened with this is like a great champ for horn speakers if you're looking for soundstage depth. One thing I noticed right away that the Acme 845s, they bring the soundstage up higher than what these will. They seem to bring things up higher, more like the Conrad Johnson Premier 11A, bring the soundstage higher up. But then they did some things like the Conrad Johnson did. One thing is they don't have as deep as a soundstage as what tubes come with the Simply 845. I noticed that. And then the instruments that are single instruments, like you'll be playing something, there could be a horn, or you got to excuse my Mickey Mouse gloves. You know, these are for touching the tubes. My Mickey Mouse gloves here. Anyhow, so the bass is extended and low, but is it lower than the tubes that are in here? I would say no, because the bass is more forward. And whenever you bring bass a little forward, it's always going to sound louder than if you set the bass back in the soundstage where it belongs. It may not be perceived as being as loud. And you bring it forward, it could seem louder. And that's something like the Conrad Johnson is a push-pull amplifier, and it would bring certain instruments up forward in the soundstage. Let's say you got a clarinet, you got a saxophone, you have a trumpet or something, like a bass trumpet or something, and it may be an organ or something like that in the doors. It may come out more forward with like the Conrad Johnson, but so did it with this tube. Now the Acme tube didn't do it as bad as like the Conrad Johnson. Now I'm not saying the Conrad Johnson is bad, it's good, but this didn't quite do it the same as what the Conrad Johnson did it, but it still did it. And I noticed certain instruments seem to be popping out a little more, and I know the presentation of the Simply 845 puts those instruments back, even though they're solo instruments, back in the soundstage deeper. So you lose your soundstage just like you do when you play the Conrad Johnson Premier 11A. You lose that depth, that magic. You don't have that magic. I noticed another thing that the tube did, that the setup that they sell with the tubes they got, is the speakers didn't seem to disappear. You could always hear left and right speaker or pick them out. It didn't seem to magically make them disappear like the setup here with the 845. This makes the speakers disappear. Really, it's quite nice, especially if you have horns. Remember, we're talking about horns here. Horns are a forward presentation. And when you can get horns to be more laid back and have a deeper sound stage and not tell you that, hey, I'm over here, I'm your right speaker. Hey, I'm over here, I'm your left speaker. You know, when you can get them so they more or less disappear, that's a good thing for horn people, because horns can be a little forward and they can get a little edgy. And I did notice that the Acme 845 can reach almost that little edgy compared to the 845s that are in here. Uh, that edge is taken away. It's more of a mellow, where these, they can become edgy. Now, what about the mid-range? I can't say the mid-range was really better. It's more forward, but is it really better? No. No, I'm going to say the mid-range is more to my liking with this. The presentation of the mid-range, because of the sound staging, it's just a lot more user-friendly, if I could say that. I'm not trying to say the word mellow, but if that's the only word I can use is mellow, it gives a better presentation of the music experience and separating of the instruments than the Acme 845 did. The high frequencies, I can't say were any better. It's just that, in fact, I like the way this does the high frequencies. It's very detailed. They get put back in the soundstage, like if there's chimes or something like that, or a triangle, like you may hear it like on the Pink Panther or something. It doesn't throw it forward at you. It still keeps it in the soundstage, which makes it blend better in with the rest of the musicality of the whole Simply 845. So, in other words, I guess to put it in a nutshell, the PSVANE 845 Acme, it basically made the system almost sound, not quite, almost like the Conrad Johnson. And I was listening to it thinking, there's something here, I got to put my finger on it. It's not, it lost its magic using this tube. It did. The whole system lost its magic. What is it? Something with this tube. Then I realized it's presenting the music. Not that it's bad, and it may be just what people like, but that magic kind of went away that the Simply 845 gives you. And I can understand why this, for Unison Research, is in their top of the line of integrated amplifiers that use an 845 tube, because it really, after you break it in, put about 50, 60, 70 hours on it, it really does get better with everything. Its presentation, the separation of instruments, the timbre, everything else gets better as it kind of breaks in. And this just didn't present that to me. It sounded, like I said, more like the Conrad Johnson, the push-pull. And I thought, no, I don't want that sound. Not for an SET amplifier. I like the magic of the Angaku. I like the magic of the Simply 845. And maybe screwing around with tubes isn't tube rolling and messing up what the integrated amp can do. Maybe that's not the wisest thing to do, even though these are very well made. The glass is very thick. I cannot say enough about that. However, here's the bad side of it. And all I have said about it is it gives a different presentation of everything. You can still hear a lot of detail and stuff with this tube, as you can this, but it gives a different presentation. And I really like that sound staging depth and the way it separates everything at a deeper one with drums and stuff, where they were always more forward with the Conrad Johnson and with this. This isn't quite as bad as the Conrad Johnson as putting things forward, but it does put it forward. And I like that magic. I like it. I like the way it sounds. It's non-fatiguing. Hours and hours of listening. It did present itself a little forward, and it changed the way the horns sound. Now, this doesn't mean if you had other efficient speakers that this tube would not sound great. No, probably would. It would probably be your cup of tea. it just presented itself so much different than how it is that I didn't like it. Now, the bad part about it is this tube I'm holding right here, it red plated on me. And I thought, oh, wow, that's not good. That means you got a bad tube. So I switched the tubes, these two tubes. I switched them, and it red plated on the other side. So it's a bad tube. And it's like, wow. Some people have made mention in comments that they have a quality control problem. I don't know. I'm not, that's my disclaimer is I don't know. Anyone can wind up with a bad tube, but for the price these are, which they're very expensive, for the price these are, I would say the quality control should have been held a lot tighter. Now, it could be a lot of things. It could be because this is self-biasing, where I couldn't manually bias the tubes. It could be that. But since I switched the tube from the left or right channel, and it did the same thing, I'm going to assume that it's the tube and not the amplifier could not bias the tube, because the other tube got biased, no problem. But this one red plated. And if you're not familiar with red plating, that is when the plates may glow in orange or red, or if you shut down your amp, you'll see it glow in red, like overheating from the electrons hitting it. And that's a bad sign. That means you got a bad tube. And you shouldn't play your system with a bad tube, because you can do damage, more damage to your amp or your output transformers, which are very expensive. In fact, the output transformers, your transformers in there are probably the most expensive thing in the whole entire amp, because that's what makes the amp, is those transformers, how well they're made. So if that ever happens to you and you see the plate turn red, or if you turn it off, your plates should just remain. If they're gray, they should be gray. These are like black, they should remain black. This one was cherry red, like almost like an amber in a fireplace from wood. It's like, wow, So I'm sending this back to the company. It's a defected piece of tube here. It's defective. And I wrote them a letter. And that is one reason I bought it from Amazon, because, Amazon watches their sellers to make sure their sellers, treat their customers right. And it's a shame. It really is a shame. It's just a beautiful tube, heavy, beautiful tube. But if it's no good, it's no good. But the sound quality of it, I wouldn't say is better than the ones that originally came with the Simply 845. So that is my review of this tube. Your outcome, if you buy them, may be completely different than mine. I'm just letting you know what I know about the tube, and one I'm red plating, and therefore I'm sending the tube back only because they're too ungodly expensive to, you can buy a whole amplifier for the price of these tubes. That's how expensive they are. So no, I'm sending them back. You can give me my money back. I've never in 50 years ever had a tube really red plate. I've seen it in TV sets. Okay, old, TV sets that had tubes. But I've never seen it like in old time radios. I never had a tube red plate. And I never, with my stereo, ever had a tube red plate. But that's why I have the disclaimer is, maybe if it was manually biased, but then it could not bias the tube automatically with this amplifier and this particular tube. So I know the tube, something's going on with this tube. So that's it for this review on the PSVANE. I I really wanted the review to be a great review because it is such a well-made, beautiful looking tube. And at its price point, you know, you like the 300B, that Western Electric 300B that gets really high rated reviews. I really thought this was going to get a very high rated review, but it changes the whole amp, but for me, not for the better. Okay, the presentation with the tubes the amp comes with is far, far superior than what these tubes presented with the same integrated amp. So I hope you enjoyed my review. I give an honest review of what I heard. These tubes will go back. One of them's bad because it red plated. That's the name of the game when you get tubes. Anyhow, until next time, happy listening, and thank you for watching. And don't forget to subscribe.